everyone, and welcome to the Philly Factor. I'm your host, Paul Perrello. Well, if you, like me, have been a native of Philadelphia, you know that we are very, very attached to our news channels as well as our news personalities. And we tend to get upset when someone decides to leave or, given the business, they're shown the door. But fact of the matter is, we really have an attachment to our news anchors, our news reporters, and even beyond that, people that host talk shows in Philadelphia on television. There's such a rich history in Philadelphia television news. And I'm so glad to say that fellow LaSalle alum, David Grzybowski, is the author of a new book, The Oral History of Philadelphia TV News, The Big Story. And we welcome Dave to the program. Dave, what a wonderful job you have done with this book.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. It's good to talk to you again. It's my second book around. I didn't think I'll be writing two books since leaving LaSalle in 2013.
Right.
But here I am, and yeah, I'm excited to talk about it, and I'm excited for people to read this thing. I think there's a lot in there for people to understand and learn.
Yep. Your first book was about another LaSalle guy, the great Tom Gola. And we had you on talking about that a number of years ago. This book really takes a deep dive into the rich history of Philadelphia television news. And I haven't been to other Philadelphia television markets. I early in my career worked out in the Midwest and upstate New York. And of course, whenever I travel, the first thing I do when I get into the hotel room, and before, if we're at a theme park, the first thing I do is turn on the local news just to see what's going on. But I don't get the sense of attachment that people have for their news teams in these different cities. But here in Philadelphia, I guess it's unique and it's special because we really do come to feel that they're TV news people. They're there to tell us a story, but we really have an emotional attachment to these people that come into our living rooms or now on our cell phones, if you will, each and every day. Would you agree?
Yeah, totally. Like I said, I was fortunate enough to work in the TV market, Philly TV market for a few years. Still kind of do it now, produce a Mummers Parade and other things. But I worked in Raleigh, North Carolina for a year. And I'm like you, Paul. Like you go to Disney World, you turn on the local news just to see if there's another Jim Gardner out there, right? Like, or
Yeah.
like who's their main personalities. But yeah, even when I lived in Raleigh, like I tried when I went from Philly to Raleigh, I tried to see if I could, and I was working on air, if I could bring the Philly TV flair to a different market, and it did not work. Like the
Wow.
feature stories of like, eating donuts at 6 a.m. and juggling hamburgers and interviewing, Johnny Smith, who has he's 90 years old and he has a barber shop and he's closing shop. Like that's the Philly story to me.
Right.
Um, and when I went to Raleigh, I didn't really feel that. And writing this book, obviously people bring up other top markets like Chicago, Los Angeles, and New York. But I mean, I would say New York's very close, but I don't think anyone there's no other city in the United States that cares about who's dating who got fired, why isn't this personality on the broadcast? Is this main anchor away? Is he or she sick? Like we care just as much about Jim Gardner than I think we care about, Bryce Harper in game 5 of the NLCS, like making it, striking out or getting a hit. So like I think people when they read this book are going to understand how Philly TV has progressed from 1970 till today.
Yeah, 1970 is a pivotal year in Philadelphia television. I am old enough to remember um, uh, the television news anchors of my youth, and we're talking, I was born in '57, and so of course I became aware of them in the '60s and into the late '60s. I mean, the John Facendas, the Gunnar Backs. Gunnar Back may seem I may be the only one that remembers Gunnar Back, but he was on Channel 6. He was there before Larry King was there. These newscasts back then, where they started out as like 15 minutes, Facenda would go on to have a wonderful tenure at Channel 10, and then, of course, went on to be the voice of NFL films. But 1970 really is a pivotal time in Philadelphia television news. And can I say, I'm going to go out on a limb here, having met him and talked to him and interviewed him a few times, that with the arrival of Larry King from Miami, the
Mhm.
whole landscape begins to change, correct?
Correct, Paul. I'm glad you brought that up because I wanted to bring this up in this interview. The number one thing that I've learned in this book is that Larry Kane is underappreciated in the history of his legacy in Philly TV.
I would agree.
If people, the first chapter you read in this book, one of the first few chapters reading the book is this kind of back and forth, like rivalry, if you will, between Jim Gardner and Larry Kane.
Hmm.
People don't realize this, I'm 33, so people don't really know this, and I wasn't around for that either. But Larry Kane started the Action News pretty much. It was a part of being an Action News format. Like Channel 6
Sure.
has been the same since our WFIL to WPVI, Channel 6, 6 ABC now, has been the same mindset, mantra, and legacy station since the 1970s till today. Like literally, everyone I've asked that worked at PVI has said, and it's a little different now because there's a lot more turnover in 2024 with new talent. I mean, Channel 6 looks a lot younger than they did
Sure.
4 years ago, 5 years ago, and that happens, right? But the number one thing is that Larry Kane is underappreciated. Not that people aren't appreciating him, but I think he deserves. I mean, Jim Gardner is up top, right?
Sure.
He's the guy. He's the guy. But he's definitely on the Mount Rushmore in Philadelphia TV broadcasting, and I think if you give a scale of 98 out of 100 for Jim Gardner and his legacy in Philly TV, I'm getting Larry Kane a 96, 97 too. Like he for what he did, and obviously he tried to start at WFIL, went to try to make it big famous person in New York, still lived in Philly, got escorted by police to go to New York. Like he tried to be the guy, and the fact that like he came back to Philly at all the other stations to do his thing and still compete against Gardner, I think speak volumes. I honestly think, and I'm not saying that because I wrote the book, but like you could write a whole movie script about just the legacy and like rivalry between those two. And I think I'm really excited for people to read that chapter because I think it unearths like I know in the book I don't know if you read that chapter yet. It's like one of them says a rivalry between me and so and so, like no way. And then the other person says, no, like if you read through the lines, like there's a rivalry. Like let's be real,
Yeah.
like sport, like you're taking my job, and the rest is history. So yeah, that's the number one thing that I learned in this book is Larry Kane is underappreciated, and I think he needs his flowers now. And I'm hoping that this book kind of does that when people read it.
Yeah, I would agree. And as I said, I interviewed Larry a few times about his Beatles books, but
Yeah,
Larry is, if not the only person, one of the people that really got me to take that big step into this business because, and I just told somebody yesterday this story. It was a friend of mine from New York. We had lunch and we were talking about Larry, and I remember I must have been in high school, and Larry was interviewing the then police commissioner or first term mayor. He was in his first term, Frank Rizzo. It was a live television show on Channel 6 on a weeknight, unheard of back then to give a half hour to a news anchor to do an interview like this. And Larry King just grilled Frank Rizzo like you couldn't believe. And I, being an Italian kid from South Philadelphia, Frank Rizzo was larger than life for so many reasons, but I was so moved by the way how Larry handled himself that I actually, get this, sent him a letter. I sent him a letter in the mail, and he got back to me. He
it's cool.
responded to me and he autographed it. And then many, many years later, when I interviewed him about his Beatles books, I showed him the letter. And he looked at it and he was like amazed that I had kept the letter. But I told him, I said, Larry, you're one of those people that had so much of an impact on me as a kid growing up in South
Yeah.
Philly that I decided to get involved in this business. But the, first of all, this is quite an undertaking. And maybe that's why it took you so many years to do it, because uh, there are so many, the cast of characters reads like a who's who in Philadelphia television history. So how were you? What was the mindset, or what was the way you decided you were going to break this book down into the different chapters and interview as many people as you could for the book?
Yeah, it's a great question. So, when I had this idea to write the book, I sent emails out. I think I read it in the back of my book. Like I sent like 12 or 20 emails the night I decided to say I did the research. Let me see if people are involved. I sent out 10 to 20 emails, and I legit got 7 emails back within 5 minutes of people like,
Wow.
I'll talk to you, I'll talk to you. And I was like, okay, like I'm on to something. And that was interview number 1 and 2. Um, Lori Wilson, who of NBC 10, was one of the first people to email me back at like 11:52 at night after her newscast. And I was like, okay, like this is like people want to see this. This book could have been a lot bigger. I actually deleted a few chapters. I had a whole entire chapter on Frank Rizzo himself, of the way people covered him. I think, and there's more sports things I wanted to add too. Yeah, so like when it's interesting, like just I think people will go down a trip down memory lane of like 1970s till today. What made it difficult during this process, I interviewed 250 plus people, and it took me, to be honest, it took me a little bit to get Jim Gardner to sit down with me, which is
Really?
totally fine. Yeah, it took me probably like 12 to 16 months for him to say okay.
Mm.
Um, and it took me another 14 months just to interview the talent from Fox 29 because of it was during COVID. I needed to be on calls with their PR people. And this book could have been out a year and a half ago, Paul, to be honest. It just, you understand how PR and media work this year. You want to make sure the person says the right thing. And that's another discussion for another day. Like there's people that told me things on and off the record. And I really, there's various scandals and stuff and off camera things that people wanted to talk about. And that, although that is interesting, and in this book, there is some of that, but I didn't think it was my job to be a gossip book. Although, I mean, it does sell. Let's not sugarcoat that. But yeah, the chapter layout is I think we did a great job laying it out. And like I said, this is a 300 plus page book, and I think it could have been easily 550 pages. But I'll be honest, I don't want to charge anyone, $52 for a book. So here we
Right.
are with this what we have now.
Uh, but the one thing that amazes me is how many people agreed to be interviewed and to, for you to include them in the book. I mean, were there some people that and maybe you don't want to name names, but were there some people that you reached out to that you really thought would jump on the opportunity to talk, and then they said no, and you were kind of disappointed that they said no?
Great question. I mean, I don't mind. I mean, Monica Malpass decided not to talk to me, which is fine. A few other people that I didn't talk to, whether they're at another station currently. Monica was definitely one of the bigger names, and I approached every person I talked to like, hey, I'm doing this book. I'm talking about, it's kind of like a where were you during this event. It's not too crazy. It's not controversial or nothing. But if you want to talk about controversies, by all means,
Mhm.
you can talk about it. But yeah, I mean, it was a little difficult just getting people. I mean, all my interviews, I actually should add this up. All my interviews average from anywhere from, I think my lowest interview was 12 minutes, and my longest interview was with Jim Garner. It was almost 2 hours.
Mm.
But my average probably interview on the phone was anywhere from 40 minutes to 55 minutes. Like I have so many hours of just, transcribing that was not fun.
Mhm.
But I had to transcribe it. And I actually had the help of some fellow LaSalle people, LaSalle students at the time when I was writing the book to, they worked with me and we helped me transcribe. But um, yeah, getting people on the phone was a little difficult, but I think once people realized what I was doing and they whispered down the lane, said, I would call one person and I would say, "Hey, do you, what's so and so up to these days? You think she'll be interested?" And then it kind of just like snowballed into, yeah, you got to call this person. Here's this person's number. There was another name that stands out, like Walt Hunter did decline to talk to me, which is totally fine,
Yeah.
and because he was writing his own book, and I respect that, but at the same time, I don't think 6 quotes in my book would have messed up his book. But he was another big name that I definitely wanted to talk to because he's Mr. TV. He was everywhere. He's
Absolutely. Yeah.
Steve Keeley of CBS 3. He was everywhere and doing stories. So
Yeah.
those two names come to mind. But I think I could write a book on how to interview 250 people for a book.
It's pretty funny. Total transparency here. I mean, I did not know. I was interviewed by
Yeah.
Dave a number of years ago. I just told my wife earlier today because she asked me who was on the show, and I mentioned it was you. And she said, "Oh, is that the guy that does the Mummers Parade?" I was like, "Yeah, he's a LaSalle guy. He's a good guy. He does the Mummers Parade." I said, "Oh yeah, I'm mentioned twice in his book," and I'm sort of humbled because I never thought I would have made the cut. But if anybody's really interested, just pick up the book and go to page 105 or page 305, and there I
There you
am
go.
right there.
There you
First
go.
time, Dave, I have to say thank you that I've been interviewed for many things, and I've been in newspaper articles and magazine articles, but I've never been included in a book. So I
Yeah.
do appreciate that. And the one thing is that this goes sort of beyond television news because later in the book you get into the whole genesis of how not only how the book is about how television news changes, but even how the Mummers Parade, which I know you're a vital part of the broadcast for the past few years, and even again, I assume this year, but even how the Mummers Parade, which was a staple on the major either 3, 6, or 10, and how the bottom falls out because the whole landscape of television changes, and this time honored tradition of the Mummers Parade basically was about to wither away if it wasn't for some independent people coming forward and trying to salvage the Mummers Parade.
Yeah, and we're kind of going through that now. And I say we, the Mummers. Like, a few 2 years ago, at one point we were live streaming the Mummers Parade, um, and doing it, that way and not on TV. So yeah, that chapter is obviously near and dear to my heart. Been involved with the parade for a long time now.
Sure.
Little David was once, in the parade and, doing dance moves on TV on New Year's Day. And Steve Highsmith, who is my mentor and who really gave me my start in my career. I must say it's pretty funny. And I guess the stars aligned. My editor, Ryan Mulligan at Temple University Press, didn't know that Steve Highsmith was my mentor. And Steve's the last quote in my book about the legacy of Philly TV. And I just think that's like really, to me, that's really special because it's like he didn't know that. And like the stars aligned. And Steve has a great quote at the end of it, just about like puts a bow on the book, really. And I first saw that when I got the copies of what the book's going to be. I was like, man, I was like, we got to keep that because that was meant to be. Steve's my guy. He's been with me from a long time. I'm actually a little upset that, I mean, never say never, but we never got to do the parade together because I think we would absolutely crushed it.
Sure.
Uh, I think, and it goes back to your point earlier about how these people, we all love our personalities. Like Steve Highsmith's, such a great guy, and he didn't have to do all the things he did during his tenure in Philly to just like go all in on a parade and celebrate the people who make the city of Philadelphia what it is today. And there's other people that do this in the city now. Like you have all these other personalities that, Jamie Apodi loved the Gary Papa run, and
Sure.
Jim Donovan at CBS 3 does a lot of charity work, and the list goes on and on. So, um, I'm fortunate to definitely have Steve on my side, and yeah, the Mummer Spray chapter is really interesting to learn that you know 1 year it's like I don't have a TV contract, and even 2 years ago we planned we had a phone call on Black Friday, and that next Monday we were on the phone with WFMZ, and we planned the 2022. Yeah, if I'm correct. 2023, 2020, I forget the year.
Right.
But we planned the parade in less than like 22 days, a full
Wow.
year. Yeah. So, I think people will learn, especially that chapter, like it's not just a parade you put the switch on. Like there's a business side to it on the TV front and on the Mummers side as well.
Yeah, and again, that's an important thing because one thing that even like when you're doing the broadcast, it's flawless, it's seamless, it's live television, but a lot of people think that it just just all comes together, right then and there. But there's so much work that goes into it, just like putting on a television newscast. The anchors just if it's a 4 o'clock show, they don't walk in at 3:45 in the afternoon and just sit down at the anchor desk and somebody hands them the script to go. I mean, there is a lot of work, and I think one of the things that the insight in the book is that you come away with a tremendous appreciation of the talent and the work that actually goes into putting on a newscast, and I think you've brought that attention to the forefront, and I hope people come away with a better understanding and respect of what it is to put together a newscast or a parade, because it really just doesn't happen. There's a lot of things that are in the background that are constantly working and grinding to make it work.
Yeah, and one of those chapters that I wanted to add was the morning shift and just getting people's like, reactions, like what it's like to work that shift. I worked that shift probably for almost 3.5, 4 years when I was working in TV at PHL 17 and WNCN and CBS North Carolina. And like I remember vividly, literally driving home from driving to work, and I remember waking up on the bridge and I showered and shaved and got ready for the day. And that um morning shift like just really is an out of body experience. I was, eating cheesesteaks and donuts at 7 a.m., 7:40 a.m. and acting like it's, 1 p.m. for lunch. And I think people when they read that chapter are gonna like really appreciate like, you know, you might wake up at 7 a.m., put on Good Day Philadelphia, but Mike Jarrett's been, hustling and bustling. I mean, even Steve Keeley, like he told me he works out before he goes to work at like 3, 2 a.m. And I'm like, you're crazy. Like people don't know that. Like to see this guy like, going nonstop from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m., but they don't know that he's, doing crazy workouts at 2:30 a.m. to get his mind right for the day. So hopefully people can appreciate that morning shift a little more when they read that chapter.
Yeah, the majority of the 44 years that I've been in broadcasting and radio, much of that, it was like a mentor of mine. He said, "You're," and much of that 44 years was doing the morning shift, and
Mm.
morning drive, which is the prime time in radio. But he said to me, he says, "Your body will never ever get used to the hours because you are up at like 2 o'clock in the morning to get into work, because everybody that goes at the time would go into their car at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock to go to work. They're depending on you. So you have to get the jump start on everybody. So, yeah, it's funny because I always wanted to write a book about, radio, which is constantly changing. And so is television today. I mean, much of what we're talking about here harkens back to, a time in Philadelphia television, that, at one time we only had 3, 6, 10. Then we had 1729 and then 48, channel 48. But
Mm.
now the landscape has totally changed. So do you think in the few minutes that we have left here, Dave, that the era of the television personality and the connection to these stations that we had will continue, or as younger viewers, media um, um, types come up, and that's not what I'm looking for, but younger people as they don't necessarily connect with the traditional 3, 6, 10, 29, you know, um, and everybody's on their phone now. Do you think this is all in a state of flux? Television news?
Um, that's a great question. I think that, there's a chapter in the book about building trust with viewers. And to be transparent, if I had to redo that chapter, I would ask people more about this new age of misinformation and how we receive and put out our news. Obviously, when I was in the industry, still is in the industry, you want to get the word out. It's what's the word I'm looking for? Saying like you want to be accurate but fast and not
Sure.
put something out there that's wrong.
Right.
I do think, the Philly personality, legacy and people that have their like natural habits of watching things will still continue. But I think it's going to be interesting in this new political landscape that we continue to have ebb and flows with whoever you're voting for or whatever politically you stand. Like you watch that person because of how they act, or how they give you the news. And I think it's interesting to see in 2024, like, the news is the news. Like if you're watching Channel 6 or Fox 29, like they're telling you the news. Like I remember Jim Gardner during his interview told me, which really stood out to me, that he would report in this new age of social media, he would report something that was already reported and just like restate it. And he would get influx with tweets of people saying, "Oh, that's not true." And Jim would say, "What do you like? It is true. Like I'm just
Right.
telling you that it rained on October 7th, and tomorrow it's going to be sunny and 79 degrees." Like whereas I think we're in a weird situation right now with, people have their natural habits. I think the local angle of people, liking their Jim Gardners, their Cecily Tynans, and Mike Jarrett's of the world will still continue, but I think you're going to see more personalities be more vocal, like the Brian Tafts of the world. Like,
Sure.
and talking to Brian, like he was very open to like talk about his viewpoint, especially like a few chapters of where he thinks Channel 6 is and how he, builds trust with viewers because we live in, like I said, we live in this age of, information, disinformation. And I think as long as that is the gold standard, I think people will still respect these female and male personalities, weather forecasters, to just say like, hey, like this is happening and this is based on facts and not just made up whatever. Hopefully that answers your question there.
No, absolutely. We could go on and talk for about another hour easily about your book, but as you know, in this business, the clock tells all. So, Dave, I want to thank you first of all for your time. The name of the book is "The Oral History of Philadelphia TV News: The Big Story." Jim Gardner, right there on the front cover. Did you have to get any waiver to use Jim on the front of the book? Nope.
No, the front cover took a while. That's probably like the seventh edition that we had, and the shot clock was down to 2 to get that ready, and we went with that photo, and it looks great.
It does. It does. And it is a great book. And Dave, I want to wish you continued success. Are you working on anything next after this? What's your next project besides the
Um,
numbers?
yeah, I mean, I do. I love writing a book. This one definitely drained me a little bit. I do have another idea, but if my next book is anything, I think it's going to be a topic that is outside of the city of Philadelphia and something bigger. I think I've kind of maybe have the chops now to do a national story or something that can move the needle a little more. But I'm definitely blessed with the 2 books I have now, and um, never say never. So we'll stay tuned for more.
All right, Dave, thanks so much for being with us. Until next time, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on the Philly Factor. We'll catch you the next time around. Have a great one.